And continue on. This is fabulous, the things you're saying.
Well, the big boy in the room, obviously, is this guy right here. We talked about how Girls' Day was on March 3rd. Well, there was an equally important, arguably more important festival for many centuries that took place on May 5th, Tango no Seku. Now we call it Boys' Day. And rather than a display of a stylized imperial family, if you will, they would focus on historic characters, historic personages, those of great valor, or who died tragic deaths, or who had a little bit more of a, what I like to call, it's a technical term, I don't use it lightly, as part of their gestalt, as part of their feeling, because at this point, again, the festival's purpose is not just to sit there and enjoy the dolls, but they had a function, right? So these were considered goryo. And goryo were very effective in dispelling evil, dispelling bad influences. And so entire categories of, or characters of dolls emerged again basically in the 1700s. And our peak, our golden era, is the Edo period. And in the 19th century when we had all of these dolls being created. And I want to focus on this guy first, not only because, holy smokes, it's a big doll, but it is an amazing piece and done by the son of Hara Shugetsu, who I mentioned earlier, who founded or who invented the hina form known as kokinbina. His family went on to be dynastic in importance in terms of the dolls that they created for festival floats, for Boys' Day, for Girls' Day. They were basically the go-to name in the Ningyō industry, in the doll industry for generations. And so Hara Shugetsu III is maybe known to some other collectors because he also became very famous for his netsuke. We mentioned the small carved figures that are known as netsuke, which are belt toggles, beautifully, intricately done. Well, Hara Shugetsu did both these figures as well as being a very valuable collecting focus for the netsuke. Now, this figure doesn't have a particular identity. Frequently, we'll have dolls that it's like it depicts this particular character. This is what's more known as a taisho, or a wise general. You find an amazing, just even the hardware. When you pick up the helmet, it's iron. It's created as if this dude was going to battle. You have the face mask. You have the battle whisk. You have chain mail. You have fur boots. You have your long sword. You have the bows and the arrows. So he is
and that dragon.
He is accoutred just as if he was a warrior back in the day. But by Hara Shugetsu, we have two ways of identifying. One came with a name plaque indicating Hara Shugetsu, but also if you pull off the head, there is a shaft, and on the shaft it is signed Hara Shugetsu. And based on style, we see that he's got inset glass eyes.
This is wood.
This is wood. So the head is, at this point, this is a solid wood head, inset glass eyes, but a lot of the features, again, are going to be from the modeling of the gofun. And the artistry in this is just so spectacular and intense. Now, I'm going to try and do this. You keep talking just briefly while I get this off, because I'm going to take off the helmet because the carving of the head is extraordinary. I wanted to have them set up. I'm going to pass around behind here. I wanted to have them set up correctly, or correctly-ish, so that you can see what the overall feeling is of the piece. But I also want to take off the helmet.
While you're doing that, let me ask you, so this artist carved it or designed it?
He carved it. This would have been carved by Shugetsu. He would have worked with actual armorers to create the metal, the helmet. You pointed out the dragon before. That's a maedate, or the prow. But, oh my God, look at the head. It is extraordinary. He's got carved hair. The top knot comes back. Each line of hair is individually incised.
Wait, that top knot is carved?
Yeah, so this is all carved, bends back over, wrapped as if it was, you know, how they would have treated it. You can see the shaved nakasori there in the middle. So this is a young warrior. Just the artistry of the head alone is extraordinary, and that's where Shugetsu signed. So if you look at his pieces, giant festival floats, you can see again a signature look, the way he approached his carving, a very distinctive element to his pieces.
I mean, I'm looking at like that, the philtrum, the definition of the chin, around the eyes, the upper eyelids. I don't know if this is part of what you're talking about, but to me it's just really fine craftsmanship.
I'm going to take the liberty because it is just too awesome not to deal with. Take the head off. But here, this is where the signature is, Shugetsu. But if we look at him in profile, just extraordinary. The depth of the elements, the ears, the brow, the subtle shaping of the brow.
Hold it so they can see that signature for just a minute. Come in on it.
I don't know how the light.
It's okay, he'll get it. And that's carved in there, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
Not just written, it's carved.
And then the depth of the ears, the layers of the ear, and then this is the top knot that I was referring to, but all the hair, individual line incised. Just absolutely, absolutely extraordinary. And this is why Shugetsu was considered such not only important lineage just in general, but
It's a piece of solid wood.
exactly.
It's incredible. You know, one of the things I was taken with when I first saw him was his tattooed hands. I don't know if they're tattooed or not, but that's what I said they were.
So the hands actually are simulating leather gloves. So they do look tattooed, but this is the deerskin gloves that warriors would have worn, but beautifully, and actually this is fabric over the wood, creating the gloves. So it's just, again, each element of this particular doll befitting its scale. This is not, your standard size. The artistry of Shugetsu was carried out into each and every element, the quality of the brocades, the quality of the metalwork. The thing weighs, it's so significant all the way around that it is a masterwork. It is a masterwork of Boys' Day, and finding Shugetsu signed pieces are just nigh on impossible.
It doesn't happen.
And outside of Japan, I'm not even aware of any piece outside of Japan by Shugetsu.
That's
so
exciting.
An exciting piece to be able to offer at auction. And when Michael first showed it to me, I was just gobsmacked. I couldn't believe he had found it. So absolutely extraordinary. But also, Boys' Day could have its fun side. There you go.
This is incredible to me.
So
Look at this.
This is, again, I've never seen this outside. I've never actually even seen this in Japan. So again, Boys' Day, a warrior, but it's depicting Momotaro the Peach Boy. And some of you will be familiar with the famous tale of Momotaro, who an elderly couple living in the woods find a giant peach floating down the stream, and they this is this great boon, we're going to take it back to our hovel and eat it. But when they cut it open, a boy springs out, and it's Momotaro, who grows up to be a defender of the downtrodden, a protector of the weak. And he decides to go to the island of the ogres to retrieve, one, to punish them for all their depredations, but to retrieve the treasures. And along the way, he picks up 3 companions. He picks up a monkey, he picks up a dog, and he picks up a pheasant. And they become his boon companions throughout his many, many adventures. And this is a very popular fairy tale. But to have Momotaro, who in essence was a warrior, he went off to battle, he defeated the ogres, to have him depicted as a bona fide samurai warrior with his minions, the monkey as an advisor, the pheasant as a bannerman, and the dog as sort of his guard and vassal.
Kind of reminds you of Don Quixote and his
chasing windmills and
yes, exactly, in a way, with his little odd companions.
There's little details that are just so. The more you get into it, it's an extraordinary assemblage of piece. They're wearing straw sandals that they would have worn marching off to war. Beautiful lacing. The face, again, beautifully carved with inset glass eyes, dating this to about 1850 or so, so the very end of what's known as the Edo period.
Face.
But this set, all right, of them depicted as a warrior doll with his animal companions as vassals in formal garb. Oh, you just don't see it. You just don't see it. So super excited about this.
I just love him.
And then on another note. Florence wanted me to.
I love him because he's the tea server,
He's
and then
the
you
tea
told
master.
me.
He's the
but
tea
then
master.
you told me his story.
Right, so he's a tea master, but he's with a twist. All right, so yes, he's got tea implements, and you think, oh, cute, we're sitting down to have some tea. Well, yes and no. So this depicts the historic character of Senno Rikyu. Senno Rikyu was, yes, he was a tea master, but he was a Buddhist monk, hence the shaved head. Beautifully done features here with a little hint of blue, showing that he hasn't shaved. Again, showing sort of his masculinity and his virility. But he, in addition to being a tea master, was a political advisor of a warrior figure by the name of Hideyoshi, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who was a very important figure in Japanese history. And he would use the tea ceremony as a way to not only meditate and calm himself down between various campaigns, but also seek the advice of Senno Rikyu, who was very well connected, but also because other generals and other figures would use him as a tea master. He had a conduit through which messages could be passed, negotiations could be undertaken through the guise of tea. So he
like a calming effect or something?
No. So for example, tea ceremony in Japan, very ritualistic. To go into a tea hut, you had to take off your sword. You had to bow deep to go in, which means that you were humbling yourself. You were making yourself on equal level with the individuals there. And so you would sit, have tea, but it was also a time in which communications could take place. And it was secret because you were the only one in the room. So Hideyoshi would use Sinno Rikyu to communicate to other political figures, to negotiate, to find common ground, to maybe smooth out some bristly problems. But of course, personalities at the day were mercurial and they did wear swords. So at one point, Sinno Rikyu offended Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and so he had to commit suicide ritually because he was no longer in favor and gone. Didn't end happily, but for a while he was probably, arguably, the most important figure in all of Japan, wielding an enormous amount of power with a tea whisk.
I liked it much better until you got to the end of the story.
Well, you can't just, you got to tell all the details.
Well, I don't know.
Adds to it. In my mind, it just adds to the old, and it comes with great, accessories
the ceramic
that are
itself
actually
looks absolutely
de rigueur
wonderful.
about how tea ceremony would be done. A little bamboo whisk.
And you made a note when you gave me the cataloging. You made a note, be sure to arrange the utensils exactly as I'm showing them here because that's the correct protocol.
The tea ceremony is nothing, and I'm not a practitioner, is nothing if not regimented. And you train and you train and you train on how to pick up a ladle, how to put the ladle down, how to wipe something with a cloth, how to rest, taking your tea scoop, this is a bamboo tea scoop, how you get the tea out, how you tap the tea down. Each element is codified as ritual, and to become a tea master of that level, you had to have it down. So that's why I wanted, when the photograph was done, it's a little bit out of whack here, is to be as accurate as possible because it's important. It's not just tea utensils thrown out there, it's part of a tea ceremony with ceremonial importance in terms of how everything is arranged. And unfortunately, someone who's studying tea ceremony goes, well, that's not supposed to be there, but you can edit it and set it up as you like. So.
We have other wonderful characters from a collection also that are from the Boys Festival.
In terms of Boys Day, we have Minamoto Yoshitsune, again, brilliant tactician fighting with his warrior monk Benkei, depicted down there in Gosho. We have stories of dramatic cliffs, running down a cliff, a guy on horseback leaping into a river gorge. I mean, hey, you don't get that in your average bisque doll.
Do you have Jingo? Is that how you say it?
Empress Jingu.
Is she from the Boys' Day?
Exactly.
I love her story.
Actually, that would have been a good one to have.
Tell this to the women that are
Jingu,
listening.
we should have had a Jingu out because you're looking at ostensibly this uber male festival, yet one of the core figures is a woman, Empress Jingu, who was a quasi-legendary 3rd century shaman and empress. Her husband received word from the gods that he should invade the land to the west, which would be Korea, and he demurred. He said, "No, I'd rather sit home and play my zither." And so the gods struck him dead. She dons his suit of armor instead and leads a naval armada.
Pregnant.
Well, no, you're giving away the
I don't
story.
care.
You gave away the best part. Leads this naval armada, but ties a girdle of rock around her wombs because she's pregnant at the time and delays the pregnancy 19 months so that she could subjugate the country, come back, and then give birth to the baby.
That part was a little wrong.
There you go. So, yes, so this idea of a pregnant woman forming the centerpiece of a Boys' Day display is interesting.
And it usually comes in 3 parts. One of them is a bannerman then.
So one of them is a bannerman, but then you have, there was a figure, Takunuchi, who is basically like the Methuselah of Japanese history. He was said to have lived to be hundreds and hundreds of years old, and he was her core advisor. And so once the baby is born, he is typically depicted kneeling, holding the baby while she goes about and does the things that an honest warrior does.
It's a great...
Yeah, it's an extraordinary tale. I think there's two or three sets of Jingu in the collection that are coming up.
So now we have another whole category of dolls. They just have so many wonderful creations. And I'm like you, I'm here to just ask questions of all of the people who are watching this don't know any more than I do, or maybe they do know more than I do. I don't know. Nobody could know less than I do. on this subject, but also I keep wanting to, as you talk, I keep wanting to point out correlations with Western dolls or Western doll production, so we'll get into that even more.
Well,
So,
we've
go
sort
ahead.
of hung a left here, and now we're dealing with dolls as entertainment, dolls as part of the theater, in very different ways. So let's start with the big guy here. People may be familiar with the term bunraku, which is sort of Japanese puppetry, but what they don't know, and I don't think they really truly realize, is that bunraku theater, Japanese puppetry theater, actually elicited or was responsible for some of the greatest works of Japanese literature. The playwrights working for the puppet theater were creating drama on the level of Shakespeare. They were creating drama on the level that still today are considered the benchmark of Japanese literature. And all designed to be acted out by puppets on a stage. And it's interesting because puppets have structure. I can't speak to Western puppetry, but the Japanese evolved a very specific, in the form of bunraku, we'll use that term for these kinds of dolls, these kinds of puppets, evolved a very sophisticated and complicated way of depicting them. So for example, on stage, you would have 3 individuals who would be responsible for the operation of this one puppet. You would have the master puppeteer, who would be responsible for the head and the right arm. And throughout the entire thing, he's guiding, he is controlling just the head and the right arm, setting the pace, setting the movement, that type of thing. His first assistant, who was in training, would operate just the left arm, and he would have to work in tandem, in conjunction with the lead puppeteer, because his gesture on the left had to mimic or reflect accurately what was going on with the overall puppet. Then you had a third individual who would be down below working the feet of the puppet. Now imagine this. You have 3 people operating one puppet. You're on stage and there are maybe 20 puppets on the stage. All right, that's 60 people on stage at one point operating dolls. They are depicting battles.
Can you see the people at all?
They wear, typically today the way it works is that the headmaster has his face exposed, but he's wearing all black. The other 2 are completely, they have a black hood and black clothing, black gloves. So basically you forget they're there. They're there, you're aware of them, but as you're into the performance, which is done to the accompaniment of chanting and music, the puppeteers are mute. They say nothing. The chanter and the music is the only accompaniment, and then they enact the drama. But you have this very complex ballet going on, choreography that is just insane, because they're all having to move on stage at the same time, depicting and interacting. There's love stories, there's ritual suicides, there's even one that I love that's a funicular. They're going up in a gondola it's craziness. But the artistry of the puppets themselves are also extraordinary, because you get the same degree of detail in the textiles, the armor that is used. You have articulation of hands where the fingers can actually grasp various they can grasp fans, grasp whatever is needed. So they become incredibly functional. I have to take the head off to do the eyes, but the eyes shift to the left and right. The eyebrows go up and down. It's
the eyebrows themselves.
The eyebrows themselves to emphasize intensity and expression. They can go up individually or together to create a sense of humanity, infusing humanity into the puppets. And you have puppets depicting warriors. You have puppets depicting ladies, generals, emperors, peasants. I mean, it is the entire panoply of Japanese life gets depicted within the form of puppetry.
Are they usually larger size like this?
This is actually on the smaller size. They get even bigger depending upon scale and also the nature of the theater that's being done. But you also have smaller. Frequently when you start getting to smaller quote-unquote bunraku puppets, typically those are souvenir dolls from the bunraku theater, as opposed to full-scale 3-person manipulation, or they're for a very small sort of a local theater, that type of thing, where you have one person in acting. But when you start getting to this thing, it takes 3 people to do it, because you have to hold the puppet up, you have to operate the legs, you have to operate the hands, and you only got so many digits. I mean, you need 3 people in order to make it happen. And so it's an exciting, when people get into or focus just on bunraku Ningyō, it's not just the beauty and the artistry of the doll, which is extraordinary, but then it's the tales that are told, and they are never ending. What they did, and this is very, very interesting, is that they would create types of head. So this is what's known as a bunshichi, And bunshichi are warrior figures of great intensity. And so the facial features, the way they're done, this really intense expression, basically set the tone for the character. So when a puppet comes on stage with a bunshichi head, people already know the nature of the character based on the head style. So if it's a musume, if it's a princess or a young maid, she will have a certain face, and people know that that's the musume character. But what happens is through the deft manipulation of the puppeteer, the character comes completely to life. Even if the eyebrows don't move, they're expressing an extraordinary range of motion. The same face has to be happy, sad, anger, grief-stricken, awestruck, inspired, sleeping.
And in synchrony with the other two people and the other characters.
Exactly. And just all, and so they study and study and study, not only in the craft of the doll, but the makers themselves to create these things. Because
hey, do you ever think there was a troublemaker that just said, I've had it, and so when he's supposed to be like kneeling or something, he decides to kick?
He'd be out. He'd be out. There is zero tolerance for troublemaking in any of the thing. No, you step out, intentionally or not, I'm sure your career is very, very short-lived.
Now, what is this? He's a battle fan?
So this is actually what's called a gunbai, or a Chinese battle fan. So this is actually wired in a little bit so it doesn't fall out. I don't want to... Yes, it's wired in right now, so we don't lose it. But a gunbai is a signal fan. Western military forces would use it to signal forces down on the field. They would be set up away, and by the manipulation of the fan, it would be sending signals. So this is what's called a gunbai. Would have been held in his hand during parts of the scene, but here it's anchored in. I could probably get it out, but I don't want to lose it and need to keep it. But beautiful metalwork, beautiful detailing. Again, all the armor.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, just really, really fun.
I mean, just looking at the way it's constructed, the
Tabi
suit
socks,
of armor.
and you can see how that's constructed. Just so beautiful, so beautiful. But dolls in theater occupy an extraordinary category within Japanese dolls, because at the same time that you had this kind of puppetry going on, you had an entire theatrical empire of mechanical dolls. Mechanical dolls in Japanese is called karakuri Ningyō, and karakuri Ningyō would be done large scale theatrical maneuvers similar to the bunraku, but all done through waterworks, through string mechanisms, through weights, coiled springs, and there was a theatrical empire called Takeda, which created these incredibly complex dramas, but using mechanical dolls. Or they were silly. For example, they had a neck wrestler, and they would have members of the audience come up to challenge the doll to neck wrestling. And so they would tie, and if you don't know what neck wrestling is, you have a loop of rope around your neck, goes to the person, and you try and pull the person over just using the strength of your neck and the rope, right? So you're not choking them, it's the neck's on the back. But little did they know that the doll's neck actually connected to a long shaft that went through the floorboards of the stage, and there were men down below who were pulling the doll back and forth.
So it was like 3 to 1.
Exactly, or 4, whatever. And so they would let the guy, the audience member would come up and challenge the doll, and he'd be winning a little bit, but then suddenly 4 men underneath are yanking the other way, and soon the guy's being dragged across the stage, much to the delight of the audience. So it went from lowbrow to highbrow. You had, some very lowbrow. We won't go into it there. It's a family show. And so, but immensely entertaining back in the late 1600s and early 1700s. But as an offshoot of that, you had a fairly early, early 1700s, mid 1700s, you had the development of fairly sophisticated mechanical dolls that were then brought into the home for home entertainment. And they were called zashiki karakuri, or parlor karakuri. And we have 2 examples here, and these date from about 1800. And so this is the idea. We have to go back. It's a simpler time. Right now, with Netflix and whatnot, we probably wouldn't enjoy watching this over and over and over. But back in the day, the idea that you could just turn a simple crank and have mice go up and down a tower with the gentleman banging his drum and turning his head, that was adorable. That was fun. That was entertainment. And similarly on this one, and you always turn clockwise. Always only turn clockwise. Actually, let me do it.
Yes, please do it.
That way, the camera couldn't see. This, you have the drummer, and then you have an acrobat that spins overhead.
But this is not unlike the entire automaton and wind-up toy industry that developed in France and Germany. I know so many of the very sophisticated collectors of French automaton always look back to Japan for the roots, for the beginning of the whole automaton movement, and they always cite certain famous pieces that were done. But they evolved from the French great parlor pieces, or great larger display pieces they did. They evolved into doing what you've just called the parlor pieces as well. And the Germans, in fact, there was one firm called Zinner and Sohn, and they had a whole series of these little hand-wind mechanical toys like this, little children in a tea party, or couples dancing, or that type of thing. Very, very similar. There's so much overlap and correlation between the different cultures that I never understand why collectors say I only collect one or the other. I say collect a theme or a type.
There you go. And part of the beauty when you are dealing with karakuri is that we have a lot of documents from early on explaining the mechanisms, how they were done, a breakdown. And this is where a lot of, from the books that I've read, that deal with this interface between Japanese technology and Western doll technology on the mechanical level, is that the Westerners were able to actually see diagrammatic representations of how it literally was done. Even if the doll didn't exist, they had basically blueprints on how to make, but of course they interpreted it to their taste, to their characters that would relate to their audience.
But the roots were there. I love these two pieces. I think they're absolutely charming. And it's funny you say that about, it's not like a Netflix episode, because when I see these, when they come in like the Zinner and Sohn German hand wind, or even the French where you key wind them and then the little girl does this and then she powders her nose and these simpler things, I think, oh God, there wouldn't be a lot of tolerance for it if this was something introduced new on the market today, because we're so used to boom, boom, bang, bang. But these were simpler times, and these were delighted people. They would stand and look at them for hours.
Because it looked like the doll was actually doing it. I mean, ignore the man behind the curtain. The doll is performing. It's simple, but it's the doll that's doing it, and how captivating. And then you think candlelight, you think, in a tatami mat room in the Japanese context. It's just, they're magical. They're absolutely magical.
Well, what is this little fellow?
Oh.
I made you bring him out.
You did no, but it's good.
I love this.
There's so much, and you don't want to forget anything. But there's so much to cover. This is what's known as a Kobe Ningyō. Again, a very simple play doll, kind of in its larger form a mechanical doll. This actually is a freestanding one depicting a sort of a demonic or a goblin warrior with his sword and fan, wearing his armor and his tongue sticking out, and he's got inset bone eyes. But Kobe Ningyō were souvenir dolls made in the port of Kobe, and a lot of tourists went through there, a lot of seamen went through there, and they would pick these up, and some of them are housed in boxes, and you turn a simple crank and the tongue would extend or the eyes would pop out. But Kobe Ningyō are actually very popular and highly collected and very difficult to find. So there's 5 or 6 Kobe Ningyō in this collection.
Yeah, there are, and like some of them have the eyes pop out, and they're really just absolutely charming.
A lot of them are goblins or demons, and they're also called Obako Ningyō or ghost dolls, because the subject matter tended to be a little bit along in that vein.
It's funny.
So no, they're
it's
super
amusing.
fun, done out of various types of wood, boxwood, and that type of thing. So a number of Kobe Ningyō, again, simple entertainment in doll form, but beautifully executed. When you get into the details, they're quite marvelous in their own right. But in this large figure in back, this is sort of a
bridge figure,
sort of a transition kind of concept for us here in our talk. I mentioned the Takeda Theater that was doing those mechanical dolls. Well, the theater burned down, frankly. The theater burned down in the 1750s, and so the Takeda family because of financial and political corruption.
Okay, I'm really ignorant. I thought Takeda was a Japanese word for theater. No, Takeda was a particular
Takeda literally
theater.
Speaks to a family, the Takeda family, the Takeda family empire. And they were brilliant mechanical doll makers. And so when the theater burned down and their bases of operation in Osaka sort of went kablooey, they sort of diversified and branched out, and they started doing, or continued to do, and invested more in doing giant mechanical floats of floats with mechanical dolls on it. But they also moved up to Edo, Tokyo, and started doing these amazing dramatic doll figures that are known as Takeda Ningyō, depicting kabuki actors. And so I have a particular penchant, love for these dolls. Do you want to put that down?
It's okay, I'll hold it.
So I love for these dolls because for a long time, even in Japanese publications, they did very little with Takeda Ningyō, saw them as not being worthy of study. And the examples that they would show in books is like, well, of course you're not studying that. That's not interesting. The Ayervais collection has some amazing Takeda Ningyō to show just how beautiful a form it is. And so typically it is freezing a kabuki actor in a moment of great drama, of great intensity. So they twist and they turn and they frequently cross their eyes and performing what's called a mie. So it captures the climax of a moment within kabuki performance. And as a doll, they are extraordinary because you get this great interplay of the silk brocades. In his dramatic action, he has thrown his outer sleeves off, which are these are his outer sleeves, to reveal his inner kimono. His inner kimono has all the supplemental embroidery, and so it is a fashion statement because kabuki is all about the fashion and the flair. And so these Takeda Ningyō, as they are known, are a moment, they're freezing a moment in theater. And they have certain hallmarks. Frequently, they are almost invariably they're on these black lacquer bases with a front aperture cloth. Using the black velvet that I told you about earlier as being a hallmark of very quality dolls. So frequently on good Takeda, you'll find the black birodo there frequently in the collar. But the facial modeling is extraordinary. And it's always fun to go through and figure out who they are, because if they're depicting a kabuki performance, it's a particular role. And so you look for clues. So what warrior figure carries the parasol and is wearing geita? Well, you know, he's posing as a dandy in the brothel district while he's trying to sleuth out the villain.
Do we know who he is?
Yes, yeah. So this is Soga no Goro in a particular role, Sukuroku, in a number of dramas where he sort of hides his true martial identity and goes undercover in the brothel district, working as a dandy until he finds the person who's stolen the sword or who has corrupted a woman, or, you know, there's any number of themes, but he's always undercover in the brothel district with his snake eye umbrella.
A good guy.
He's always a good guy. No, Soga no Goro is the quintessential good guy. He does some interesting things, good being a moral relative, but he's always considered the positive. So a beautiful, full-scale example, very large-scale example of a Takeda Ningyō.
The textiles are unbelievable. The color combination, they're just extraordinary.
And the brocades, it may be difficult to see, but this is dragons and clouds and sacred symbols and auspicious elements. And then, of course, this embroidery on the top of a dragon face with the eye is just over the top.
Turn that slightly so maybe the camera could get the dragon image there.
And then also the intensity of the face. And so the question is, you know, are these front read? Are they side read? Do you turn the figure in different ways? And it reads very, very well. But the modeling, the carved hair, again, facial features, just extraordinary. So the Ayervais collection contains some very significant Takeda Ningyō that we'll be profiling.
Well,
so this is sort of like the transition.
Is the one on the cover of your book, is that a Takeda figure?
Exactly.
That I showed, which is in this collection as well.
Exactly. Though he's holding, it's Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the guy who had the tea master killed. He's on the cover of my book, but a brilliant Takeda holding his gourd symbol.
Oh, I didn't realize he's the one that had the tea.
Yeah, he's the one that had
I'm
the tea.
sorry, then I don't like him anymore.
No, you got it. It's all history. We were talking about that earlier. It's all history. You can't blame him, and don't blame the doll. Never, ever blame the doll.
All right.